This is the Tack Shooter. They're a pretty cool guy, you may have heard of them. They are featured in almost every Bloons TD game today. They are incredibly effective regardless of skill level, and canonically there is a monkey inside every one of them, which makes it funny how they work inside a machine that is slowly cooking them alive. But that's beside the point. Recently Ninja Kiwi have released the Tack Paragon, and I thought it was time I take a look at this little guy and give my opinion on how well they perform in the current meta. So without further ado, let's get right into it. The top path is renowned for bringing the heat into the kitchen. It combines strong damage bonuses with equally high attack speed boosts. Just be wary of the prices, as it can quickly burn a hole in your bank account. Starting with faster shooting, it increases the Tack Shooter's attack speed by 33%, and when cross-path with the blade Maelstrom, it increases the attack speed of the ability by 17.6%. Even faster shooting copies the previous upgrade's homework by giving the same bonuses for double the cost. With both these upgrades purchased, the Tack Shooter shoots once every 0.63 seconds, which is roughly 78% faster than base. Moving to tier 3, we have Hot Shots. Now this upgrade has a reputation for being decent, but just falling short compared to the other tier 3s. This upgrade gives the Tacks +1 damage and allows them to pop every balloon type, which does sound good on paper. But the main issue with this upgrade is that it has no pierce. Both Blade Shooter and Tack Sprayer are given some form of pierce bonus, while Hot Shots is left behind with a measly 1. And given the later upgrades in this path have shedloads of pierce, I find it rather ironic that it isn't given a simple +1. While Hot Shots is a decent stepping stone upgrade, I generally wouldn't recommend purchasing it unless you're planning to invest further into this path. Okay, with Hot Shots out of the way, let's talk about its successor, Ring of Fire. Now this is one of the many upgrades in the game that I'll consider a curveball, because it completely subverts your expectations by overhauling how the monkey functions. In the Ring of Fire's case, it takes the tack out of Tack Shooter and starts firing bursts of flames. The new flame rings are treated as their own projectile, rather than a spray of 8, so it no longer misses half its shots, but it comes at the cost of lower overall damage. But the main reason you pick up this upgrade is the extra pierce. The difference between 1 and 30 is literally night and day. The Tack Shooter goes from struggling against most balloons to obliterating swarms. Oh, and did I mention that the Ring of Fire doubles its base attack speed? Yeah, that really makes a difference when comparing its DPS to Hot Shots. The only downside of this upgrade is, well, there's a few of them. Ring of Fire's damage type is downgraded from normal to fire, so it can no longer pop purples. The base attack has relatively low Moab DPS, and its performance falls off a cliff once Super Ceramics start rolling out. The first two aren't too bad to work around, but the last one really puts the Ring of Fire in a bit of a predicament. Let me get this straight, I have zero problems purchasing this upgrade if the game doesn't go beyond 80 rounds. But in longer game modes, especially in chimps, it's mostly a waste of money unless you're going for Inferno Ring. Now wrapping up this path, we have the microwave itself, Inferno Ring. The base flames get a healthy stat boost, increasing its damage, attack speed, range, and pierce. All of which are welcome, but the biggest part of this upgrade is the massive meteor attack. Every 4 seconds, the Tack Shooter fires a targetable fireball that deals 700 damage on contact, and applies a 50 damage DOT up to 10 nearby balloons. While extremely powerful, the main ball starts with 1 pierce, which is kind of shit for a monkey at this price tag. But luckily, its pierce can be easily buffed by cross-pathing, and most non-percentage pierce buffs. Striker and Top Path Mer Monkey do help with the base 5 pierce, but to increase the Meteor's pierce by 1, it requires Lord of the Abyss and sacrificing Gwen, which obviously isn't worth it compared to other options. Speaking of Gwen, on top of her usual heated up buffs, she provides extra attack speed and blast radius to the Ring of Fire and Inferno Ring, hence making her the preferred hero to pair it with. While Inferno Ring is up there as one of the stronger DPS monkeys, the main issue I have with the upgrade is its hefty price tag. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy using it, but not enough to justify saving up 49k with just a Ring of Fire as your primary DPS. Sure, purchasing a mid-game Moab Staller is normal while saving up for a lot of tier 5s, But with it requiring a lot of buffs to function late game, it quickly transforms the Inferno Ring into an expensive strategy. Hence why I typically don't recommend it unless you have Gwen and a plan around the save up before beginning the run. Now, despite my complicated opinions on this path, the top path's cross-pathing is relatively straightforward. Just go with the middle cross-path. Seriously, every now and again I fall into the trap thinking that the extra damage provided by the bottom path is better, but boy, I was wrong. Literally quadrupling Hotshot's PS makes all the difference when going up against dense early game rounds. And the fact that it scales to provide a larger bonus to Ring of Fire makes it so much better. The extra PS often makes the difference between popping and leaking ceramic rush waves, and the bonus range helps Ring of Fire efficiently distribute its PS. Inferno Ring receives the same bonuses, but it also increases the Fireball's PS by 1. As mentioned before, it isn't the only thing that increases its PS, but the crosspath is extremely cheap in comparison, and it has 100% uptime. The bottom crosspath is only marginally better for two fringe scenarios: layer skipping and single target DPS. Both extra Tack upgrades give a total of +2 damage to Ring of Fire and above, allowing it to one-shot Zebras and 3-shot Ceramics, which can be useful in specific challenges. Even more Tax also gives +300 damage to the Inferno Ring's Fireball, which allows the Fireball to one-shot fortified DDTs, while having better overall DPS against fortified ZOMGs and BADs. If you're a fan of either one of these benefits, knock yourself out, but when using it for the sake of the video, the extra damage was negligible compared to the consistency of the middle crosspath. Tying all things together, top path Tack Shooter certainly has its moments as a mid-game crowd clearer and as a late-game DPS, but the path's high cost, along with dependency on Gwen and expensive buffs, makes it not as versatile to slap into any strategy. Moving to the middle path, the Tack Shooter takes a step away from consistent DPS and gambles all of its damage on an ability. While considered the weakest of all Tack Shooters, it still holds some merit for its strong burst damage at its low price point. Not to mention it's the GOAT for race events, when it isn't banned. But getting into upgrades, longer range Tax increases the Tack Shooter's range by 4 units, which is a decent increase, but not that remarkable in comparison to other upgrades. Super range Tax repeats the same range bonus provided by the previous upgrade, but it also gives a nice +3 PS to the base Tax, along with some other neat bonuses to cross paths. Upgrading to Blade Shooter, the Tack Shooter takes a trip to the local hardware store and replaces its Tax for circular saw blades. The blades have 8 PS, can pop frozen balloons without monkey knowledge, and as of recently have an increased projectile size. This makes it great for race events because its relatively high PS for its cost makes it perfect for dealing with swarms of small balloons. But when placed anywhere outside of races, it's kind of shit. Blade Shooter doesn't receive some form of damage boost without cross-pathing, and its high PS doesn't do much to save it. Sure, it's usable during early game, but the upgrade is dead weight unless you're investing further into this path. Upgrading to Blade Maelstrom, it adds an ability that carpets the screen with powerful blades for 3 seconds. Each blade deals 2 damage and has 100 PS, while also ignoring any obstacles that may block its line of sight. While extremely powerful for its low price tag, the ability is only useful for clearing dense waves, or you guessed it, race events. But with its high cooldown, along with a lack of lead and camo popping power, Maelstrom is held back in a lot of places from being a strong monkey. Moving to Super Maelstrom, it greatly enhances the power of the Maelstrom ability, increasing its duration to 9 seconds, firing 4 streams of blades instead of 2, and tripling the blade's PS to 300. The base blades also get upgraded to deal 2 damage and can pop any balloon type, which is a feature that is no longer possessed by the main ability. While being a massive improvement over the previous tier, would I recommend investing into Super Maelstrom? Well, no. It falls into the same trap as Ultra Juggernaut of being a cheap but incredibly niche monkey that only shines when used in the right conditions. Ignoring race events, Super Maelstrom is only remotely functional on single-laned maps with a decent bend or choke point. Another major drawback is that it requires shed loads of buffs to scrape through late game rounds. Primary mentoring is a given, since it reduces the ability's cooldown, along with a whole bunch of other benefits. but you also need a mix of damage and attack speed buffs to keep its DPS somewhat reliable. Also, with most of these buffs being ability based or have some form of downtime, Super Maelstrom is by far one of the most micro-intensive strategies, next to Plasma Monkey Fan Club and Total Transformation. To be fair, it's a lot more fun than either of those strategies, but I'll be lying to you if I said it was one of my go-to picks due to how inconsistent it can be. Now, cross-pathing. Both cross-paths are decent when applied to the base attack, but when talking about their ability, they have two completely different use cases. The top path increases the attack speed of the ability, which is useful for bursting down high HP targets, and of course, race events. While the bottom cross path increases the duration of the ability from 1 to 3 seconds depending on the tier, hence making it the better cross path for standard games, since it reduces the effective cooldown of the ability. Oh yeah, and it also reverses the rotation of the blades, because why not? Out of the two, I would personally go with the bottom cross path, because having good uptime is a lot more valuable in chimps over the burst damage provided by the top cross path, while I more lean towards the top cross path during races. Overall, the middle cross path is pretty fun for its price point, but with it requiring a lot of support to perform well during late game, it's more of a gimmick rather than a viable tier 5. While the other paths draw a lot of their power from complex attacks or activated abilities, the bottom path takes a simpler approach by increasing its attack speed and the number of attacks per volley. And I don't blame it because it works. Almost too well actually, given it has received the most nerfs and reworks of any tack shooter. But even after its changes, the bottom path is an extremely strong monkey, boasting high raw DPS at an affordable price. Starting with more attacks, it simply adds 2 extra attacks per volley for the low price of $110. And on top of that, it gives extra flame damage and maelstrom duration when used as a crosspath. And the best thing about this upgrade is that it's repeated for a second time, duplicating the bonuses while keeping the same price. But this time, it also adds 300 damage to the Inferno Rings Meteor. Moving to tier 3, Tack Sprayer continues the trend of adding even more attacks by introducing another 4 to the volley. And thanks to a recent balance change, the tacks also get 1 extra pierce. Like the other tier 3s, it's not exactly groundbreaking, but considering it's a lot cheaper and reacts better to buffs, it's decent for squeezing in a little extra damage while tight on cash. But outside of that, it's primarily a stepping stone upgrade for Overdrive. Speaking of which, the upgrade shifts the tack shooter into maximum overdrive, increasing its height and tripling its attack speed. By itself, it's a fairly decent DPS tower, especially when buffed, but when spammed in large numbers, Overdrive absolutely obliterates anything that enters its path. Swarm of ceramics? Gone. Grouped Moabs? Not a problem. DDTs? DDTs! Yeah, sharp tacks and lead properties don't tend to mix. But luckily, this path synergizes well with every D-lead monkey in the game. Top path Alchemists, Embrittlement, Bluestorm, heck even Gwen's Heated Up all provide lead popping power, along with other bonuses such as extra damage and pierce. Both of which synergize extremely well because the bonuses are applied to each of its tacks. Another pair of heroes it synergizes well with are Pat and Geraldo. Pat's rallying roar and effective stuns amplifies the burst potential of the overdrive, while Geraldo has an absolute field day since most of his items significantly boost its effectiveness. And there are many more synergies than the ones I've just mentioned, but to be honest, I'll be here all day explaining them to you. I get that their range can be a problem on some maps, but given their DPS is just amazing, it's hard to hate on Overdrive. Moving to the tack zone, take what I said about Overdrive and dial it up to 1000. It's the bigger and more powerful version of Overdrive, doubling the number of attacks per volley, increasing its attack speed, grants a +1 Moab damage bonus, and significantly increases its range. Most of what I said for Overdrive can be applied here, but obviously, since it's a tier 5, it's not as spammable. But it doesn't change how I like this upgrade. Just shove it with a line of buffs and say hello to another black border. Now, cross-pathing. For 99% of all use cases, the top cross path is obviously the go-to pick. 50% extra attack speed is just undeniably better for maximising its DPS, especially when combined with damage debuffs. To give Ninja Kiwi credit, the mill crosspath isn't actually that bad, just suboptimal. The extra pierce and range does help it with cleaning up dense waves, but with a lower fire rate, it reduces the effectiveness of external buffs. But bringing all things together, bottom path Tack is a very solid DPS, or dare I say, one of the better DPS paths for its price point. It's simple, doesn't require any strange gimmicks, and synergizes well with a wide range of monkeys. Now, as of recording this video, Ninja Kiwi has recently added the Tack Paragon, the Crucible of Steel and Flame. Unlike what the name suggests, the Paragon is relatively tame. The Crucible's base attack is a permanent maelstrom of superheated blades that explode into tacks when they expire. However, it never got the message to stop shooting because it's... yeah. The Crucible also comes with two abilities. The first ability increases the pierce and lifespan of the projectiles, while emitting a mini inferno ring just to make the top path feel included. While the second ability summons a massive meteor that does insane damage to one target, while leaving behind a ring of homing fireballs that help clean up the remaining balloons. However, one of the major features that Ninja Kiwi introduced with the Crucible is that it doesn't come with camo detection. Normal camo detection buffs don't work on Paragons, so the cheapest workaround is decamo monkeys. And as I said in my recent tier list, most of them are relatively inconsistent late game, except for a buff signal flare and a reactor. Both of which are a lifesaver during boss events, but start to struggle when DDTs start moving at the speed of light, or phase. The only way to give the Tack Paragon solid camo detection is through the Ascended Shadows buff, which is extremely pricey. I get that the Ascended Shadow provides a lot more than its camo buff, but shoehorning it into a strategy to make the Crucible viable doesn't scream versatile. In the grand scheme of things though, the lack of camo detection isn't that bad. The Crucible is currently one of the cheapest Paragons in the game, and all three Tack Shooter tier 5s can't detect camo, so it's a fair downside. However, I'm still confused why the NG and Boomer Paragons haven't gotten this treatment yet. Putting the obvious aside for a second, another boss that the Crucible isn't the best against is Vortex. But this time, it's because it can't attack unless it's within its stun range. And when put against the other bosses, it performed relatively well provided the map doesn't play against its limited range. A degree 20 with some camo support is a decent side grade to the Glaive Dominus for tier 3. And a degree 40 can deal decent damage to tier 4 and 5 elites. But at its lower price point, and thus lower power ceiling, the Crucible is held back from being a dominant DPS monkey for boss events. But the main area that the low power ceiling really shows is in free play. Testing on balance with an army of decamo monkeys, a degree 1 only made it to round 140 due to the fortified bad being too tanky to pop in time, while a degree 100 went as far as round 179, failing because it doesn't have enough DPS to pop all the bads. And subsequent reruns of the test further confirm that it fails around that round. Therefore, its maximum round sits in between the Apex and Glaive Dominus, which is expected since it directly matches their correlation in cost. But overall, the Crucible of Steel and Flame is a decent Paragon. It's good for defeating the early tiers of a boss, and as a supportive DPS later on, but there isn't really anything that makes it pop out as one of the better Paragons. And that's the Tack Shooter. Sorry this took so long, but the Tack Shooter is one of my favourite towers, and my perfectionist self wanted to make it turn out good. But as I normally say, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.